Hey guys, this is your fiery friend the Infernoman here, and if you're into games, you're right where you need to be. But before we get into it, if you like the content that I put out there, I would greatly appreciate it if you hit me up with a like, or even better, subscribe to me. It really shows that people do care about my content. Now, if you have questions, comments, stuff you'd like to see played or discussed, you can @ me on Twitter or chat directly with me as I stream 2 to 3 times a week on Twitch. A visual link for those are up on the screen right now, and I will have direct links in the details below. And for today's deck tech, we're going to be covering Gruul Burn. Now, I've actually played many styles of burn decks throughout various formats, and of course I've played several of the mono red variants that we've played on MTGArena. But what if I were to tell you by splashing into green, you actually have a lot more versatility, and also you have a way of fixing some of the problems that mono red burn currently has. But before we get into that, since it's been a while since we've actually done deck techs, let's go over again how we handle this. First off, we will talk about the creatures in the deck. Then we will go over the non-creature spells. We will then cover the land base. We'll then go over the sideboard itself. We'll have a couple matches with Sparky to show you how the deck is meant to be played. And of course, if you do enjoy this deck, I will show you at the end a couple of alternate ways that you can play this. Keep in mind, again, this deck that I've designed actually is non-budget, so it's a little off the beaten path of how usually this channel is run. But trust me when I say that most of the cards that you do crack wild cards for will be well worth it. Now to begin, we're going to be utilizing 22 creatures in the deck. Now I know that actually does sound like a lot of creatures, but hear me out for a little bit and I will explain to you why this is going to be relevant. Just keep in mind that a lot of our creatures do kind of double up with their abilities, which makes them very, very versatile and allows us our deck to reach out further than what normal burn can do. So with that, let's go ahead and we're going to begin with our first 3 creatures, which is the Soulscar Mage, the Gitu Lava Runner, and the Viashino Pyromancer. These 3 cards are your early game attackers. Swing it with them, usually getting a Soulscar Mage or a Gitu Lava Runner out on turn 1. Be mindful, of course, that because they are early 1-drops, if your opponent manages to have early game removal, they'll just get pieced out before they can do anything. But however, if they do manage to stick around, they will be able to get you damage really quick, really easy. There is, however, a benefit to having our cards go into the graveyard, which I will explain in a little bit. As for the Viashino Pyromancer, it's a 2/1, doesn't do too much, but its sweet ability at least allows it to do some damage before it gets destroyed by removal. Don't forget though that 2 damage to either a target player can also go to a planeswalker, so sometimes it's more beneficial to actually snipe a planeswalker while it's weak and take it out before it becomes a bigger threat on the board. As for your other 3 creature cards, there are your utilities that can actually do a lot more if your opponent does not deal with them immediately or has a response to them. The Bowmat Courier is your pseudo card advantage. If you haven't seen this card before, basically what it does is every time it attacks, you then get to tuck one of the cards on top of your library face down. Unfortunately, you can't see the card, so you're just going to have to hope that it's going to be a good one. But again, as you keep attacking with the Courier, you'll be able to keep accumulating more face down cards. Once you have enough, and if you can time it right, say like you've just dumped your whole hand out with burn and creatures, if the Bowmat Courier is about to die, sack it and then just refuel your hand. Bone Crusher Giant is also pretty self-explanatory. It has an expensive shock attached to it, but the damage can't be prevented, which is actually sometimes relevant in specific matchups. Just pay attention again your board state to figure out when that might be more relevant to go to face or go to a creature to activate that ability. Keep in mind also the Bone Crusher Giant also has its own pseudo protection in the form of it being targeted by a spell or ability. It then does 2 damage to that controller. So sometimes your opponent may have to risk hitting the Bone Crusher Giant, but then losing some life can also put us right within striking distance for a victory. And finally, the whole reason why we are splashing into green in the first place, Klothys. Klothys is actually a very powerful card for this deck and a great way to finish off our opponent. We only need, however, 2 in the deck. I've had some arguments where some people might say 3 might be better, but I usually am fine with 2. You don't want too many because they're just going to be a waste. But basically, if you don't know what Klothys does, it's an indestructible legendary enchantment creature god that's also a 4/5 for 3 mana. You don't really need to worry about actually swinging with it as a creature, so don't worry about the devotion part of it. The bigger thing that you want Klothys to do is just sit on the board and just have your opponent unfortunately just deal with it. Because it's indestructible, it makes it very hard for your opponent to handle. Just remember again, every turn it's pinging by exiling a card from any graveyard, whether it's yours or your opponent's, so as the game goes on longer, Klothys sticks out and starts eating up the graveyard, pinging your opponent for 2 damage, and then giving us 2 life. This is the big thing that most mono-red burn decks have a weakness to, which is they don't have a way to gain life back, and sometimes they can't go the long game. This is why we're splashing for green, to get Klothys in and fix the main problem for most burn decks. But otherwise, there you go. That is your creature package. Let's go over now the non-creature spells. Now, as for the non-creature spells, you'll be utilizing a total of 20 cards total. Many of them are pretty familiar if you've played Burn before. You'll utilize, of course, Shocks, Wizard's Lightning, Skewer the Critics, and Light Up the Stage. Light Up the Stage, of course, is not a burn spell, but the nice part about the card is it helps you kind of refill your hand. Should come as no surprise, I'm going to tell you that don't forget to utilize all these cards ideally for their optimal price, which is 1 mana. Wizard's Lightning, of course, 1 mana if you do have a wizard out. Skewer the Critics, of course, for the spectacle cost, and Light Up the Stage as well, as long as you've done damage to an opponent first off. But the real card that we want to talk about from these 20 cards is your full playset of Atarka's Command. If you haven't seen this card, for 2 mana at instant speed, you get to pick 2 abilities on the card. You can either pick your opponents can't gain life this turn, Atarka's Command deals 3 damage to each opponent, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield, or creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain reach until end of turn. This is actually a very powerful card for our deck and really makes the deck stand out from other burn decks. Mainly because you can either shut down life gain, you can either just do damage without actually having to target your opponent, which sometimes is very helpful versus the random cards that give your opponent hexproof. Being able to pseudo ramp if you are flooding out, or sometimes being able to pump your entire team if you've got a bunch of your small wizards out. And also don't forget that +1/+1 stacks on top of the prowess trigger that the Soulscar Mage would get. So it's actually pretty beneficial to have this card. Just make sure again you click correctly what you want to utilize it for. 9 times out of 10, however, you'll be mostly utilizing the 3 damage to each opponent and also pumping your team. But that's it for the non-creature spells. Let's cover the land base, which, I'm not gonna lie, is a little bit pricey. Now, for the land base, it's a little complex and a little expensive, but let's go over it. And again, I highly recommend if you want to play this deck, you really got to make sure that you have the land base for it. Otherwise, you will be suffering quite a bit. But in any case, if you do have it, 4 copies of Stomping Ground, 4 copies of Crag Crown Pathway, 4 Ramanop Ruins, 4 Den of the Bugbear, and 2 Mountains. It's really important that you want to have your full playsets of this. Yes, you can try to get away with it if you really want to do it on a budget. Just run basics. Try to minimize having tapped dual lands. And I only say that because you really can't afford to have sometimes a land come in tapped when it could mean the difference between getting in the last points of damage, swinging in with a creature that has haste, or otherwise defending yourself on the backswing. But otherwise, that's mostly all I got for you guys for the land base. Let's now cover the current sideboard. For the sideboard plan, we'll be utilizing 2 copies of Grafdigger's Cage for your Graveyard Hate. Unholy Heat is going to be great to deal with creatures and planeswalkers, and triggering Delirium means it can do up to 6 damage, again, if only you have 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard. Roiling Vortex versus the slower, grindier matchups when you just want to slowly ping your opponent out, and also denies life gain as long as you can pay the 1 red mana for it. Since we are utilizing both green and red mana for this burn deck, you can utilize a full playset of Cinder Vines to punish the control decks out there. Collision Colossus does look a little strange, but the Collision side helps us deal with some of the biggest flyers that we have in the format, and Colossus side is great for a single creature that does 1 final push of damage to your opponent's face. And finally, my personal spice, Leyline of Combustion. Ideally have this out on your opening hand, and on turn 0, throw it out onto the field for free. And at that point, you basically will start racking up shock damage to do to your opponent every time they target you or a creature you control. And if you've seen the current decks in the format, this can trigger off a lot of times and punish a lot of opponents that are not prepared for it. But otherwise, that's all I have for you in regards to your sideboard. Let's go ahead and face it off against Sparky a couple times to show you exactly how you want to handle this deck. Alright, and here we go, facing off against Sparky, utilizing our Gruul Burn deck. Let's show you exactly how you want to burn out your opponent. So in your opening hand right here, ideally 2 lands is really all you need. If you can get a 3rd, that's perfectly fine, but you obviously don't want to flood out. We only have 18 lands in the deck, so you really only should need the 2. So as you can see right here, we don't have any way of getting any additional card advantage. We do have a couple creatures to burn out. Wizard's Lightning triggers off for 1 mana, and we have a Shock. If we can get to at least a couple more lands we have to, we can trigger on Den of the Bugbear in a pinch, but let's hope we can see if we can get the rest of the burn package set up. Alright, so let's go ahead and keep it and see what we got. Okay, so first turn, Den of the Bugbear. Remember, it only enters in untapped as long as it's one of the first 2 lands you play for the turn. So we'll just end there. Alright, Sparky's going to be trying to fly over us. So remember again, you have a choice here. You could either start burning out your opponent's creatures if they're going to be more problematic for you than just leaving them out there, or you can just hold off and save your burn and hopefully getting everything triggered off in one big swoop. Okay, let's see. I think our option here is probably nice and slow. Obviously, versus Sparky, we have the luxury of kind of having a lot more of a predictable way to fight. All right, you want to pump? Okay, Sparky, I guess you want to pump up your little bird. That's fine. Okay, see, we got the Atarkus command, which is great. This will be good for us a little bit later on. So I don't want to shock ourselves too early. On the other hand, this is also one of those tough decisions where you have to figure out, do you want to take the 2 damage now to start doing some more stuff, or hold off? We're going to try to get ahead here versus Sparky. So Viashino Pyromancer, 16. All right. Try to get in one swing, down to 14. All right. So Atarkus command here can actually help us out real sweet versus this. Ooh, we got 2 Atarkus command. Okay, so here's how we're going to do this. Wizard's Lightning, down to 11. We then go swinging. Sparky's obviously going to block. Okay. So in this case, they think they can take this out. But remember, with Atarkus command, pick the +1/+1 and do 3 damage. Down to 8. Becomes a 3/3. They're down to 2 damage already. So there you go. Really quick, really easy. That's basically how you want to burn your opponent out. Try to get over them. You can see right now with the Atarkus commands, that alone is more than enough damage to deal to our opponent, Sparky. We're going to swap out to our game 2 right now to show you real quick with a couple of switches with the cards in your sideboard how you want to handle things. Okay, so as you can see right here, we are now in our second game to show you with Sparky if we were to change around some of our sideboard pieces. As you can see right here in this opening hand, we already have exactly what we want. A Leyline of Combustion, we actually have our Roiling Vortex, so think of this as more of what I would call a control burn hand. So you got your 3 lands. Let's go ahead and let's keep this. Turn 0, Leyline of Combustion out. This now gives us a little extra protection to work with. Let's see. Get the Den of the Bugbears out now. They've got their little rats. That's fine. Ooh, we also got the Clothis too. Okay, this is actually really sweet for us. Let's get the Pyromancer out now so we can start getting ahead on burn damage. And then we can Roiling Vortex next turn if we need to. What's nice now is if we have to start sponging hits, we're able to do that thanks to our setup. Let's get the Roiling Vortex out now. Soulscar Mage. All right, so no attacks. We start pinging Sparky. So if they try to hit us with any removal, we can start punishing them very heavily here. Okay, so next, Clothis is actually turned on because I realize now we actually have a high devotion, but we're not going to attack. So in this instance, we're kind of hoping Sparky is going to actually try to hit us with removal, but it doesn't look like Sparky's going to do that, which is fine. Soulscar Mage. Second Soulscar Mage. So yes, as you can see, again, this is a really, really slow way to play this burn deck, but you do have a lot more ways of getting around stuff. Sparky is going to slowly start getting ahead here. But, oh, as you can see right here, so they tried to get a little cheeky here, but you can see Leyline of Combustion, this is where it starts triggering off. So, removal, but we hit them for 2. This pumps up one of their creatures, but we get a free shock out of the deal. So we still get to keep pace with what Sparky's doing. And now that actually there are some creatures in the graveyard and other cards, our Clothis now also gets the trigger off. And this also helps counterbalance with what the Roiling Vortex is doing. So let's go ahead and eat the card. Thank you. All right, we refuel on life. This triggers off also Light of the Stage Spectacle. Prowess on all of our Soulscar Mages. Very nice. Okay, we definitely have the aggro hand here now. And in this instance, we actually want to try to Wizard's Lightning the Savage Gorger now before it becomes way too much of a troublesome card. But we want to do a free swing here. Let's see how they block. All right, get all the pumps in. We are going to lose some creatures, which is fine. Because your biggest thing you just want to do is just start getting rid of stuff on the board. All right, they're down to 7 now thanks to Roiling Vortex. Another Gorger, that's fine. But as you can see, basically here, we're already in good shape, so we can now just chump block. We don't need to worry about anything else at this point. We're pretty good. Okay, Sparky. All right, eat some more stuff. Eat a creature. Down to 5. Bring in the last Soul Scar Mage. Not that it really matters at this point, because we are swinging for full damage. They block there. But remember, shock. Triggers all around. Down to 3. And that's it. So with these sideboard cards, that's how you can also win with the burn deck. Alright? So let's talk about alternate ways you can play this deck. Now, if you happen to be a fan of the deck, but say like you're telling me right now you can't afford to use that many wildcards immediately, here as you can see on screen going to be the budget version, at least the budget version that I think you can still play and mostly get some wins in with. So with this, you're going to be sacrificing some of your dual lands to get the Rugged Highland tap lands. You definitely want to at least keep one set of lands, ideally get the shock lands. You're going to keep your Clothis, and you got to keep your Targus Command. Those are basically the non-negotiables, even if you want to play this budget, because otherwise you might as well just go mono red, which will save you a lot more wildcards, but it really won't be the same as playing this deck. If you are interested, however, in playing one that has no rares and no mythics, check out the link above. I actually have created already a commons and uncommons version of a mono red burn deck. But anyways, going back to this, some of the other compromises is you won't have the Bowmat Courier and you will not have the Soul Scar Mage. So to replace those, we're utilizing instead copies of Thermal Alchemist and Foundry Street Denizen. They are not going to be as effective, but you can still get away with at least getting the most of the game plan down with those cards. As far as the sideboard, not too many major changes that won't hurt you too much, but you could still get away with utilizing Soul Guide Lantern as your graveyard hate. Unfortunately, this, however, means that you will be vulnerable to cards such as the Indomitable Creativity and of cards like Collected Company. As far as trying to deny your opponent life gain, we'll be utilizing Tibble Rakish Instigator instead as our Planeswalker, which also can help us create a couple of extra creature tokens to sponge hits and also snipe weak creatures when they die. 4 copies of Abrade replace the Cinder Vines. Again, you will not be able to now take care of the enchantments, but you could still at least now get rid of some things in a pinch, whether it's an artifact or a creature for 3 damage. And then finally, the other replacement is adding in Flames of Keld. These are going to be cards that will at least help you add on card draw and also push out additional damage. These are going to be replacing the Roiling Vortex. But otherwise, those are your compromises to play a budget version of this deck. However, I do highly recommend, if you do want to maximize the most out of the deck, definitely get in as many of the wildcards as you can to play the main version that I've shown you earlier in order to utilize the deck to its full potential. And there you have it, everyone. Gruul Burn, for the player that loves burn, but also wants to try something a little off the beaten path. So you tell me, what do you think? Are you a fan of this style of burn? Do you actually enjoy playing something that's a little spicier than normal when it comes to deck archetypes? Let me know in the comments below, and I would love to hear from you guys. Also, again, I do want to remind you guys that we're going to try to get back into the habit of making deck techs again. I've realized now that as much as I wanted to try to keep up with some of the news that's been going around Magic and other things out there, I've had to deal with my own personal things that have made it almost impossible for me to actually make videos for almost 2 months, so I apologize for that. But I realize now probably my bread and butter should be to focus on making deck techs for those of you out there who want to at least try something new out there, who enjoy still playing the game, and I'll try to still squeeze in maybe my own commentary on other things when I feel it's relevant. But aside from that, thanks again for watching, everyone. Please be sure to give a like on the video if you enjoy this kind of content, and be sure to subscribe to the channel to see all the deck techs, the pack openings, and more. And until next time, please remember that no matter what you do play in the game of life, always be sure to burn bright. Later.